Thank you for tuning in to the Logic of God podcast. I'm Cody.
I'm Gina.
And I'm Ben.
If you're returning, thank you for coming back. And if you are a new guest, welcome.
So I think the connection here for divination and the serpent and Joseph, all of it is tied up in doubt. And I look at this story of the serpent in Eden saying, did God really say? And in Genesis 3:5, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. We think we want to know it all. We think we want to know the extent of God's mind. And we're called to have the mind of Christ, but that doesn't mean we know everything. There were things that Jesus couldn't fully wrap his head around as a man, and he prayed to God about those things. So for us to have the mind of Christ, it's different than to have the mind of God. And we try to elevate ourselves. We try to understand the depths of good and evil and power and control, and we try to grab that from him. And I think that's the lesson here, ultimately, in this divination, in this cup, in this knowledge. It's doubt. Is God really good enough? Does God really love me? Did God really make that promise to me? He made it to my great-grandpa, but did he really make that promise to me?
Oh, it's the doubt and fear of the provision of God. Like, in a little spoiler for chapter 45, but we'll get into that in the remnant discussion. But like the connection here with the serpent is like these proto-exiles. So you have Adam and Eve who just had an abundant life in the Garden of Eden, and this hint of something more, or did God really say that, or the curiosity that killed the cat. They gave up their provision from God for knowledge, and that led them into exile. And I'm going to make that connection later in depth. Is I think you have the story of the Israelites. That's who this people is too. Like, they're in the wilderness having to rely on God to provide, like, the manna every day. Like, they're having to rely on God. And you have this other proto-exile idea with Joseph. Like, they stopped relying on God to go live in provision in Egypt and go into exile. Like, they go into exile for that.
They put themselves voluntarily in it. It's a trap. Don't go.
It's a trap.
Do you get that picture of that weird alien dude?
Admiral Akbar?
Yes. Every time. That's forever ingrained in my brain. And whenever
it's a trap.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we go from this temptation of knowledge to the temptation of the throne.
The power. It takes us all the way back to when Joseph was like 17 and he had a dream, right? And now in this scripture, we're in the middle of the dream. It's not quite fulfilled, but it's very close. And so I'm going to read the scripture and we'll keep going. When he overtook them, he spoke to them these words. They said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money that we found in the mouths of our sacks, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whichever of your servants is found with it shall die, and we also will be my Lord's servants. He said, let it be as you say. He who is found with it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. And he searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell before him to the ground. Joseph said to them, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination? And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he, also in whose hand the cup has been found. But he said, Far be it from me that I should do. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. Then Judah went up to him and said, O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ear, and not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, saying, Have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, We have a father, an old man, and a younger brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of our mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, Bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, The boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. Then you said to your servants, Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again. So we are talking about a higher throne than the throne of Pharaoh, of course. But Joseph clearly is proud of his place in the royalty scene of Egypt at the time. And his brothers are calling on that as a ego stroke, so to speak, when they're trying to negotiate out of this punishment.
It's also interesting to note, remember at the very beginning of this chapter, the steward is ordered to place silver in the mouths of each of the brothers' sacks. And Judah here, upon all the sacks being opened, he's talking about our guilt. How do we prove our innocence? I don't think it's just the cup that he's talking about here. It appears that all of their silver has been returned again, and it looks really bad. And on top of all that, there's the cup. So that's why Judah is like, yeah, like it looks really bad. There's nothing we can say in our defense. We are all your slaves. But in return, Joseph says, no, only the one with the cup. The rest of you can go.
No, and I think that goes to Joseph's intention. They're like, whoever the cup's found with, let them die, and we'll all be servants. And Joseph's, oh no, I don't want that.
But very much like when Jacob is like, whoever has your household idols will be killed, and then suddenly Rachel's cursed.
Yeah, so like to me, that was just reminiscent of when Rachel stole the idols from Laban, and Jacob's, yeah, whoever stole them will die. We'll just kill him right now. Kill him. We didn't do that. Why would we do that?
Well, and for me, this also echoes the concept of Christus Victor here, the setup. For those of you who don't know, there are two different views primarily of Christ's sacrifice and resurrection. There's penal substitutionary atonement, the idea that he dies for our sins. His death is taking on the punishment we deserve for our sins. We see that very clearly in the story. However, I would also argue the other side of that, Christus Victor, of Christ's sacrifice being a way for him to get back the earth from the evil spiritual forces that have enslaved us. I see that here as well. That in much of Jewish tradition and also in the Bible, it seems that man, for one reason or another, falls astray, is enticed in and is subjugated to the evil forces of this world. And not all of them, it's their fault, seemingly. Many of them are tricked. Many of them, they had no choice in the matter. It's their ancestors that did something stupid. Their ancestors that were tricked by the angels that were set to rule over them. Joseph, in many ways, is like that. He is a prince of Israel, one of the sons of Israel. And he was sent here by God, and he was sent here for a purpose, and it seems he is straying outside of that purpose, and now his brothers belong to him. They are his slaves by their own admission. And so we see a setup from both sides of this angle, both sides, the Christus Victor and penal substitutionary atonement. The brothers have sins for which they cannot atone, and also they are slaves to Joseph. But somehow in the story, everything is going to be covered over by sacrifice.
And it's not Joseph's.
And it's not Joseph's.
I want to read the fullness of 1 Corinthians 10, 14 through 22. We hinted at it before, but I think it just flows so well with where we're at in this chapter. So therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one bread. We who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Consider the people of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices participants in the altar? What do I imply then? that food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? This is the tension that's at hand.
Good stuff.
It's the hinge between cosmic postures. The satanic grasping of divinity and rulership, and the Christic yielding of divinity to serve and die. You see both here in tension.
Definitely.
And it comes from an unexpected place, right? Through Judah. So, when we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down, for if our youngest brother goes with us, then we will go down. For we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol. Now, therefore, as soon as I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant of our father with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father.
So
Very heartfelt.
Yeah, you have Judah here, the unlikely candidate to be a Christological typology, stepping out, willing to be the sacrifice, to lay down his own life for the betterment of his brothers and his father.
You see this in Christ's cup too. The cup becomes a symbol of suffering and obedience and sacrifice. So Christ's cup, Judah's cup, directly reverses Joseph's. So Joseph's cup accuses and tests through deception, but Christ's cup absorbs guilt through self-offering. And Joseph's cup represents seeing, but Christ's cup represents being seen. And this reminded me so much of not only the moment in 2 chapters back where Joseph accuses his brothers of coming to see the nakedness of the land and spying. I think this is truly Joseph's fear of being truly known. He doesn't want to be so known that his brothers would treat him in such a way that they would sacrifice themselves for him. But in the next chapter, he's so moved by this act. And I think it's terrifying to him to be so loved and so known. He's terrified of that type of nakedness. So I find it beautiful, but also really sad.
It is very sad. We will also see that Joseph weeps and kisses each of his brothers. Whereas prior to this point, the only brother he really wept for was Benjamin. But we see that it's Judah's act of true love, self-sacrifice, in many ways for people who don't deserve it. It's that act that brings salvation to all of his brothers. It's that act that justifies themselves before God and before Joseph. And it's so difficult to put into words just how powerful the twin acts of love and forgiveness are here. And you need both. And I don't know that you can truly forgive without love. And I don't know that you can truly love unless you forgive. I think the two are inexorably connected. And I think that is why God, who is love, requires forgiveness. Because it's the only way you can love. And I think that's why after this act of love, Joseph is able to forgive. And in that act of forgiveness, he is now able to love his brothers, where it seems he couldn't before.
You see this testing, like most people will follow the line of testing, but you can't have love without the like aspect of trust. Like, how could Joseph love his brothers without knowing that they had changed in any way, shape, or form? And I think that is the trust that he gets through this act of testing them. I think you have to be honest with the text and play the tensions of if his brothers were okay selling Benjamin, that was a scenario that Joseph would have played into as well and kept his brother Benjamin there and let his other brothers go. But there's this sense of trust now that they have changed, that Judah's willing to lay down his own life for the rest of his brothers, which is far removed from Joseph's history with his brothers.
So while I was visiting up north, there was a big dinner that we had. My oldest brother is getting married. He finally popped the question to his girlfriend. Yeah, I know.
Grandma's funeral, brother's proposal.
I know. It was a crazy weekend. But during that dinner, I was sitting across from my youngest sister. And I don't have a bad relationship necessarily with my youngest sister. But she and I have butted heads many times over the years. And she's a very sharp-tongued person. And I'm a very proud person. And when you butt heads between a very smart, sharp-tongued person and a very proud person who is not nearly as quick-witted, that breeds a lot of contempt. A lot of contempt. And again, it's not my sister's fault because that's just how she is. And that's who she was growing up. And when you're very proud, you tend to hold on to these things. And for a very long time, I struggled to connect with my sister really because in your heart and in your mind, when you're a very proud person and you've been cut by words, you play the conversations over and over in your head 1,000 times and you think, oh, that's what I should have said. Oh, that's what I could have done. That's how I would have gotten her. And you hope in some part of your heart that you will be able to have a conversation with that same person in the same way and be able to cut them the way they cut you. And some part of that has been in my heart. And it's one of my greatest failings. Like we've been open about this. Cody and I are very proud people. And this is one of my greatest vices is pride. And as I was sitting across from my sister, she was crying a lot because a lot of emotions were coming up. And she started talking about a lot of things. And she and I hadn't really had a heart-to-heart talk about anything for most of our lives. But because of how beautiful the moment was, and honestly, she was a little drunk, she started talking about a lot of the things that had been happening to her and a lot of the hurt and a lot of the pain. I won't say what those things are because she said it in confidence, but there was one thing she told me that really hit me. I had no clue what happened to her. I should have known because I think the whole rest of the family knew, but I was just so absorbed in my own fantasy of jousting with my youngest sister, the way that we used to and beating her and finally winning. I'd completely missed something. And I saw her genuinely cry over it. And I saw her genuinely be vulnerable. And I couldn't see the same girl that I had a one-sided feud with. I saw my sister. And I got up and I gave her a big... I hugged her in a way I'd never hugged her before. I couldn't still be angry with her. Because the person sitting across from me wasn't the girl I fought with before. And there's an element of grieving that you have when you see that. Because the fantasy that you had, the desire of your heart to destroy someone that you feel like deserves to be destroyed is now gone. And I'm sure that Joseph felt the same way. I'm sure that for this entire time that now his brothers barged back into his life, he wanted them to be the same people who destroyed his life. And he wanted it to be right for him to destroy them. But Judah makes it clear they're not the same people. And Joseph has to mourn the fact that he's not ever going to be able to get revenge because the men who hurt him are gone. Not completely, but Judah's sacrifice makes it clear that at the very least Judah, the guy who sells him, it's his idea. Judah is not the same person. And it would be evil, an act of gross evil to punish him the way he feels he deserves. So I relate to Joseph in this story because it's hard. Like, again, it sounds like we compare him to the devil and all that jazz.
Yeah, we're getting ready to.
Yeah, but I get it. He's a real person. His feelings are real. The responses that he has are real. I can almost picture how Joseph is laying in bed thinking, oh, I'm going to enjoy this so much. They're going to go home and they're going to have twice as much silver in their sacks and they're going to go home without Benjamin. Oh, and dad is going to believe they sold him and they'll finally be accused of the thing that they actually did. It'll be justice. And now he never gets that because those men aren't there.
I think Joseph is so lucky because he's confronted with the people who victimized him actually being sorry. And most of us don't get that lucky. And it takes a lot of effort to continuously forgive somebody like that. Joseph was given an opportunity here. And I would say that it's probably like a once in a many lifetime situation to have 12 people who destroyed his life and hurt him deeply be truly sorry for what they did to him. And yes, he had to trick them into it, and it took a famine in order for this to even happen. But circumstances happen all the time. Look at the COVID-19 pandemic. Look at the 9/11 terror attack. Like there's so many things freak things that happen, even on smaller scales within families that draw people together. Like my uncle died a couple of years ago. I did all of his hospice care. I had to travel cross country to do it. And my whole family was there. And it was people I don't want to be around. But it was an opportunity, just like this. But in my case, the people who hurt me weren't sorry. They don't think they've done anything wrong. That's why we don't talk. I forgive them. But do you know how good it would feel to get told, I didn't realize the impact I had on you, and I love you, and I would never want you to hurt like that, and I'm so sorry I did that to you. How powerful that would be. And Joseph has that. But spoiler alert, he doesn't go with them. He settles them, but he goes and does his Egyptian thing. Oh, Joseph, come on, man. This moment is everything. This moment is Christ on the cross. It's rough.
When God warned him too. The second dream, he's not a star. His family is stars. They bow to him. They surrender their authority to him, but in the end, he's not with them. He's not their family anymore.
He embodies Manasseh. And it's the saddest thing ever, because one of the things in my life that I want more than anything is a mom. And I don't have one. Like being fully raw.
Yeah.
Like he has his family. He has his dad back. Everything he daydreamed about on the floor of that prison. Like I'm totally dramatizing because it wasn't like a jail. It was like a meeting house. But still, everything he daydreamed about, it's all happening. And he doesn't know what to do with himself.
But this is the tension of the covenant faithfulness or the temptation of power. Like at this point, he could have turned and gone back to the covenant lifestyle, but instead he sticks with the power and saves the remnant, but at what cost?
This is that I'm self-made. I'm going to build my throne and I'm going to sit in it too. That's something that we see a lot of today. I'm self-made.
It is tragic because I think the Lord's dreams that he gave to Joseph indicated it didn't have to be this way. We're told from Pharaoh's dreams, the two dreams, identical dreams, different details, but effectively the same dream twice. It is set by God, it will happen. Joseph's dreams were not on the same night, not at the same time. The details weren't all the same. There was enough separating them to show it's a warning. He was still one of his brothers.
Like they still even counted him as one. Mm-hmm. Even when going through their family, there's like one that's not with us. And then we have 11 in total after that.
Yeah, they still included him. And yet he leaves them behind. He forgot them. And even now, he can't fully rejoin them. And we see because of what he chooses to do, as he forgot his family, he is forgotten by Pharaoh. We are literally told, there comes a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, who forgets him. And so just as Joseph forgets his family, the Pharaohs forget him. And all that's left are the two half-tribes. And the name of Joseph, not completely blotted out, not completely forgotten. And yet, when it's remembered, is more of a reminder, a stark reminder of what happens when you trade your heritage for power and knowledge.
Yeah, so the next point for me ties up a lot of what Cody has brought up in the past and makes it tangible in terms of the connection between Joseph and Christ and the connection between Joseph and Satan. And when you see Judah's offer here to sacrifice himself on behalf of Benjamin and also on behalf of their father in a way, you see this Christ fulfillment happening. And so it gets ripped away from Joseph because it's very obvious how messed up what he's saying and doing and planning is. But then that begs the question, where does he go from here in this ideology of Satan and this arc we've been exploring? And I would argue that the very first place that he inserts himself in this dark way is by controlling every aspect of their life as quickly as he possibly can. So we see that in his control of their food, their freedom, their life, their housing, their provision, their wealth, their status, their safety. He controls every single aspect of their lives from this moment forward. That's not a healthy thing. If a pastor of a church did that to their flock, nobody would attend.
No, that would be a cult.
It's true. And at the same time, we're told that God sent Joseph here for a purpose. And also, he told Abraham his descendants would end up in Egypt as well. Now, I still do believe that there was a different way this could have gone, a much more healthy way. And if it had gone the healthy way, it's likely they would have been able to return in a much more amicable way, both for them and the Egyptians.
Look at the facts, though. Joseph sent 2 years of provisions. He covered them the first 2 years of the famine in Canaan. Like, why now do they have to move? If it was feasible for them to get 2 years at a time, they only have 5 years left.
Sure, but God ultimately does come and tell Joseph that it's okay. Tells Jacob that it's okay.
He doesn't tell him it's okay.
He tells them, yeah, we'll get there. Or do we want to jump that far?
No, you can't.
Yeah, I guess
46.
saying it's okay is the wrong way to say it. This is where they're supposed to be. But the question is, was there any other way this could have gone? And I would say yes. It could have gone differently.
I don't agree. I don't think this is where they're supposed to be. I think that Joseph knows in ancient Near East context that the fulfillment of his dream is meaningful, and he is fighting tooth and nail to see these dreams come to fulfillment. And he's doing it by his own power instead of by God's power.
Sure. The point is that Abraham was told his descendants would end up in Egypt, and they were supposed to go to Egypt to remove themselves from the land because the evil of the inhabitants of Canaan had not yet reached its full measure. And eventually, the children of Israel were meant to be brought to war against the Canaanites. So no matter what, they were supposed to end up in Egypt. The question is when, for how long, and how closely were they supposed to be intermingled with Egypt?
And where's the allegiance to God? Because in every other patriarchal story in Genesis, there are signs of allegiance. There's fruit. It seems very devoid of faithfulness to God here. There's no mention of what if we leave this land we've been promised? And up until this time, Jacob has been very hesitant to go anywhere.
Yeah, the narrative is so complex in the story of Joseph because all of Joseph's interpretations or interactions about God are from his own narrative, his own theology, bringing those out. And that's not really how the rest of Genesis works. And that's not how the next instance of God in Genesis 46, when Jacob is allowed to go to Egypt and told so by God. But Joseph never has that interaction with God that we read in the text at all. Like, the only mentions of God that are surrounded by Joseph are God was with him, but never present, never spoken to, and Joseph's own interpretations and theological exposition of the motives of God.
I'm not saying that God's purpose wasn't carried out. I'm just saying that Joseph did not care about God's purpose. He said he feared God. He said he knew God, but he also said that he was doing the walking and talking and quacking like a duck of Egypt.
Yeah, it's hard not getting ahead of myself because I think that's pretty evidently clear with Joseph calling out the remnant rather than the full covenantal line. Like, he is fully acknowledging that only a remnant will survive.
And at the same time, God literally tells Jacob that he will raise him into a great nation.
If you look at the story of Daniel, I love that in comparison. Cody did a really good job earlier. Will you explain it again?
Just the connection between Joseph and Daniel almost seems like a second chance. There's this, they're both heavily incorporated into dreams. Like, they have very similar stories of elevation and status. Daniel gets to a similar position as Joseph, as like second in command, or like head of the sages, so to speak, is what Daniel gets. And his interaction and connection to God is so much stronger than Joseph's, and it completely different context, completely different author of the book, completely different era, but it almost is a retelling of how Joseph should have handled things. Like, Daniel's in getting stuff. Like, there's a point where the king is getting ready to give Daniel, you do this and I'll give you all of this stuff. And Daniel's, I don't even need that, but I'm going to go pray to God, go talk to God, and then I'll come back to you. And very connected to praying, giving God the credit, where that's void with Joseph. Like, you see him be like, oh, aren't interpretations God's? But not really giving him full credit, or I'm going to go pray, talk to God about this, then get back to you.
No, instead he's, don't you know what my cup does, dude?
And that could just be like different authors, different narratives. Like, that is a lot of conjecture into the text. But
you can see where God is in the faithfulness there with Daniel. And then you can feel this weird echo with Joseph.
I think that's the tension in this book, the text of Joseph, that the author is trying to get at. I said it when we first went through the dreams. It is the only dream in Genesis that is not directly connected to God. It doesn't mention God at all when Joseph gets his dreams. It's not like God came to him in a dream like it was for Laban, like it was for every other person in Genesis before Joseph. He is removed from it. And I think it's to play at these two tensions.
I think it's relatable for mankind today, thinking about like the arc of the serpent and just how we react to being under pressure or under threat or emotionally unstable because of these types of things that happen to us and we want to control, like we're feeling tempted by the throne. And I think fear driving us to make decisions that look acceptable but probably are not the path God would pick for us is one of those notable things. Like, Cody and I had a conversation last week when he was traveling. When I was a little kid, my adoptive mother was very controlling. And I remember repeatedly, like, my motto with her was like, just because you have a way you want to do things doesn't mean it's the only way to do things. Because I would find ways to be efficient or creative or whatever. And it just it was not important details sometimes that she was trying to control. And it was like, just because that's your way doesn't mean it has to be my way. Let me develop. Let me be my own person. And I think that's a tricky, creative, prideful way of saying that I'm not going to be obedient. But it's also like, in Joseph's case, for his brothers, like they're doing whatever it takes because they feel so guilty and because they're so afraid of provision here. And I think there could have been a little, like, out of 12 brothers plus the father, like there could have been somebody who spoke up and was like, are you sure? And you see that kind of with Jacob later, but these brothers right now in this moment are like, all right, let's pack up.
I think I'd said before, I think there's a reason why God speaks towards the end of the story rather than any time before. It does seem like Jacob doesn't really hear from God much at all for a very long time. And it's only after the act of compassion and forgiveness and love that we see in this chapter and in the next that suddenly God seems to speak up. And I do think that it's in part because now the family's able to move forward. Now that the evil of the brothers has been exposed, like their past evil has been exposed, and they've been forgiven of it, and they've sought forgiveness, and Judah has tried to put things right and has taken responsibility. The whole family is finally able to move forward. They're not grounded in the past so much, and now God is able to reach Jacob. Now, that doesn't mean that every decision they make going forward is correct. Obviously not. But at the very least, they still have the blessing. Jacob is told by God that he is going to be blessed and is going to be made a great nation, and Joseph is going to close his eyes. That said, it doesn't mean that everything that happens going forward is good or that it was the best outcome. It's obviously not that it's the best outcome because they're made slaves.
Yeah, you can't go into this story thinking like God is a puppet master, that God ordained them to go into Egypt and become slaves. Because then if you look at the incredible suffering and torture and murder that went into, that's not God's character, right?
He did ordain them to go to Egypt, but I agree. I don't believe they had to be slaves. There are consequences to Joseph's actions. There are consequences to him falling in love, so to speak, with the wealth and the power and the culture that he became a part of. And I'm glad that you brought up Daniel, because it is a stark contrast. Daniel repeatedly, intentionally separates himself from the culture. The very beginning of his story starts out with him and his friends saying, we're not going to have any part of these purification rituals. We're not going to eat your food. Just have vegetables and water. And we don't care. This is what we're going to do. They don't bow to the statue, and they get potentially thrown in the furnace. Like, they knew that what they were risking, and then they are thrown in the furnace. And then Daniel, when he becomes one of the most powerful on the same level as Joseph, there's an edict sent out, according to the Medes and Persians, that can't be revoked. It's the most high, powerful edict that can be given, where they have to not pray to any god, basically accept the king. And what does Daniel do? Immediately, he falls on his knees, turns towards Jerusalem, and thanks God. It's the first thing he does. We see over and over in his story, he rejects all the material benefit of his position, and yet God still blesses him. We see that in Solomon's story initially, and yet we see Solomon fall in love with the wealth and power. We see a constant over and over repetition of this theme of people that have the hand of God on them, moving the hand off of them and falling in love with the wealth and power that they are blessed with. That is the secondary blessing. It's incidental to the initial blessing, which is God's hand, his blessing and his wisdom. It's only the people who manage to hold, and I don't know that there are that many examples of those who reject the earthly pleasures, the earthly respect and authority. It's mostly Daniel.
Yeah, this is a hard one not to get ahead of myself in, because a lot of this, like, see this connecting directly through. It's hard not to connect all of the narrative here, because I think there's very ample evidence to see this as covenant idolatry. Like, God knowing that the people are coming out. Like, this is Moses writing it. So he's writing it to a people who are coming out of Egypt. This isn't pre-Moses. This is Moses. So he knows people are coming out of Egypt. But also, like, anytime you see Israel go into exile, it is for assimilation of other cultures and just getting comfortable. And God, the idea in the New Testament that Paul gives us, like handing them over to the powers that be, to handing them over to Satan so that their souls might be saved. This is the remnant that is being purified through it. And like, even as Israel's exodus, like there's that idea, like the 40 years in the wilderness, only Caleb and Joshua make it into the promised land, because the uncovenantal faithfulness of Israel doesn't allow them, and only a remnant makes it into the promised land. And you have, I think, Israel fully being assimilated into Egyptian culture. Like, they are the shepherds of the land. They take care of the flock. Like, they're literally going to be the future providers for all the sacrifices for Egypt. Egypt did not become a monotheistic Yahweh nation. Like, Israel becomes the providers for the sacrifices for the Egyptian culture. Like if there was any animal sacrifice done, it is provided for by the Israelites because they become the shepherds of all of Pharaoh's flocks. And you have this full assimilation into Egypt. And I think this is like the first exile story. Like they're brought into this assimilation by Joseph, which I'm failing to see the good, the forgiveness, because even later on, like when the blessings come for the sons, Jacob has never met his grandkids. Like he's never met Manasseh and Ephraim. Who are these people? And Joseph said, those are my sons. Like the 17 years that Jacob was in Egypt, he didn't meet his grandkids. So Joseph is clearly not associating with the Israelites at all.
It's clear that Joseph has assimilated. He may have very well forgiven his brothers. He doesn't enslave them, and he doesn't treat his family poorly. And yet he is so engrossed with the culture of Egypt that he is an Egyptian. And Egyptians see Hebrews as disgusting and filthy creatures. And so he can't be a part of them. He could, but he would have to reject his position with Pharaoh.
But Pharaoh's happy for him in the very next chapter. So he has to understand how precarious his situation is, because in the last chapter, in 43, he wouldn't sit with them to feast. And yet in the next chapter, 45, Pharaoh's thrilled for him and gives them the nicest area that exists for them, offers them the full fat of the land.
But Joseph's control, like you mentioned, Gina, and like he is protecting his position through this. Like he is keeping himself very the text to me just stands out when he's like, hey, tell them you're shepherds, because the Egyptians detest shepherds. They won't go near you. I'll be safe then. Like they detest shepherds.
There is one thing that is important to note, and it's that Joseph hands off his children to his father. They are effectively adopted into Israel. And as a result, the children of Joseph, his first two children, bear the suffering that the rest of the tribes bear because they leave Egypt with the rest of them. So it's not all bad, and I do think that Joseph still does some things right, but he also still does a lot of things wrong. And because of the things he does wrong, Egypt, 1, forgets him, and 2, enslaves his family.
And all of the Egyptians.
Yes. And it's through Joseph's efforts, because ultimately Egypt becomes so successful that the Pharaoh ends up owning literally everything, which we will get to. What Joseph intends for good, and I don't think he has bad intentions with these things, but because Joseph is so assimilated and is so dedicated to doing his job for the Egyptians, for the people that have adopted him into their family, he ends up handing them the keys to his own family's destruction, as well as much of the rest of Egypt.
I see Joseph pursuing so much self-interest, and even his comments of God had a different plan for this is almost in spite of him. Like there'll be a remnant left, but that's it.
I don't know if I see it as that grim. Like in the future, again, we're jumping all over the place, but eventually his brothers once again try to sell themselves to him as slaves. They say, when dad was on his deathbed, he said, forgive your brothers for what they did to you. And now here we all as your slaves. And he weeps once again. And he says, I've forgiven you. It's okay. But I think he is lamenting the fact that he's not one of his brothers anymore. They're treating him more as a king than they are his brother.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated story because life is complicated. And we can't fully lump him into the, you are forgiven, therefore everything is okay. Because it's clearly not. But we also can't say that he is completely off his rocker, maniacally evil, leader of the enslaving empire. I think that in the end, evil is done through him, despite his intentions, because ultimately, Daniel has the right idea. It doesn't matter what good you think you can do with this world. There's a power that operates in this world you can't control. And the only way for you to do true good in this world, true lasting good that will heal the world rather than hurt it, is through God. And Daniel knew that, and that's why he constantly separated him from the world, because he knew him who was in the world. And it seems Joseph never fully understood that.
I don't think it's an either or.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I definitely don't want to sound like we're trying to make the point that like Judah is the Christological figure here, so Joseph can't possibly also be a Christological figure. It's just pointing out the areas that make people uncomfortable in Joseph's character. And a lot of what we're saying has scholarly backing. It's just piecing all of it together into what we're doing. It doesn't feel good to hear that somebody that we've been told is so good is so confusing and confused. But that is the case. And unfortunately, there are character flaws in all of us that we have to wrestle with in each other as a group and in our families. There are things that our parents have said and done, and people that we know have said and done that we're uncomfortable with. And we want to choose to believe the best in those people, but they've still fallen short, and they always will. And the point here is not that Joseph is evil and wicked and satanic and he is the preeminent figure of Satan. No, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying, look at the humanity of it. Look at this dreamer and the way that his mind works and actually analyze it. Do research outside of because I said so theology and figure out for yourself what you believe about Joseph, because once you actually dig into it, you're going to find that he is very conflicted and he loves very deeply, but he hurts very deeply.
I see so many similarities between Joseph and Solomon, and so many parallel details between their rise and their wisdom and their closeness to God and their being chosen by God, and their ultimate fall because of their pride and their knowledge and their attachment to worldly things. Joseph is clearly chosen by God, and Joseph clearly has a purpose outlined by God. And Jacob is clearly meant to go to Egypt, or at least his family at some point is meant to go up to Egypt. But everything ends up so screwed up because of what Joseph does and the way his family acts throughout much of this story. And when you look at Solomon, Solomon is chosen to build the temple. And yet you see he builds his house bigger than the temple. We see that he asks the right thing of God, to be given wisdom. And yet, just because that wisdom was given to him by God, it doesn't mean that it's beyond his control. He uses that wisdom to amass wealth, and he falls in love with this world, and he brings in wives from all sorts of nations and ends up whoring himself out to their gods. And you read Ecclesiastes, and it's a lament. I don't think Solomon was beyond salvation. I think he understood closer to the end of his life what he did, and yet he never turned things around. And similarly, I think that Joseph understood, but did not turn things around. And it's good to understand where you've fallen short. But to understand where you've fallen short and not try to make amends, not try to turn things around is a problem. Because just as Joseph's poor decisions lead to the enslavement of Israel, and also ultimately, I agreed, Cody, the entire first generation of Israel being wiped out, and a tiny remnant that remains that God has to work with. Just as that happened for him, with Solomon, after his reign, Israel is over. His son screws up so royally because his father raised him so poorly that Israel splits up and it never fully recovers.
But this is the beauty in this story, okay? Because we can sit here and argue who ultimately is the Christological figure, but guess what? There's only one Jesus.
Yes, there is only one Jesus.
And we get to take all of these things that have happened to us and use them. Joseph is saying later, I'm using them. Like, we're not the main character in God's story at all. And if we try to read into this story like main character syndrome, we will never, ever get the point. The point is not arguing who is Christ and who is not and who gets to be the pink Power Ranger. That is not what we are doing here. So please don't take it like that. This is understanding like these are real people. These are people who used the things that happened to them and they didn't always use them. And guess what? Neither did I. But you know what? I'm using them. I'm using them. And that's meaningful. for building the church, for rebuilding Eden on this earth, for continuing the creation that God made, not our own creation, not these empires that are built on whatever. We get to use what we have to honor and glorify the Lord. And that is amazing. We are not the main character. We are building God's story.
No, and I think that's the importance of not whitewashing this story is history is doomed to repeat itself unless you learn from it. And I think when you whitewash things and you aren't true to what the text is trying to teach, and clearly there's instances in Joseph's story where Moses incorporates laws into the Israelite way of life that are direct responses to Joseph.
Absolutely.
And if you don't learn from that, and that all throughout Israel's history, and why I think it's important to connect this to an exile of assimilation, because Israel didn't learn from it completely. So they had to go through another exile and another exile, and they kept on assimilating and repeating this same pattern that kind of starts here with Joseph. I do think his intentions were good. And in the beginning, they probably look great. I've done all this. I'm second in command. Like, I have grown it. Like, how could the Pharaoh ever forget what I've done for him? I've grown his kingdom, but grew it of your own power without relying on God. Like that is a story to learn from this. Like, anytime you don't rely on God to grow whatever it is that he's given you, it turns south.
And even if you do rely on God, like Cody and I did, you'll still lose everything. Like, the point isn't being comfortable and safe. It's existing honorably and set apart in a world that hates you and doesn't want what's best for you. And what's best for you is not what keeps you safe and comfortable.
And you're not promised that.
No.
God asks you to do the things he asks you to do so that you will be free. It's the most bizarre thing in that the people who obey God suffer enormously, and yet they are the most free. The closer you are to God, the greater the amount of choice you have. We see the figures in the Bible who gain so much wisdom. They get close to God, and so their betrayal is all the more impactful because they are choosing it. No one is forcing them. There's no natural impulse that's just so strong they can't handle it. It is a decision to stray away from God in pursuit of something else. But for the people like Daniel, who choose to remain with the Lord, or David, despite his many errors, who choose to remain with the Lord, they are truly free people. And the closer people get to God and the more they choose to be with him, the more freedom they experience. And by that, no matter what happens in the outside world, they experience the freedom of knowing that God is there with them, and that no matter where God leads them, it's going to be okay. That they will be useful, they will be used, they will be able to do the right thing. It doesn't matter if they're the main character in the story or a side character. Jonathan is a very small-time character in the story of David, and yet the impact of his life and his death is enormous because he's a man who is close to God and close to David and does not care that he surrenders his kingdom. There is so much freedom in the concept of not having to hold on to something so tightly and being able to give it to someone who deserves it or needs to have it. We hold on to things so tightly because we feel like we need it, because we see things through the lens of worldly wisdom. We have to see 15 steps ahead because the world is a complicated and dangerous place, and how else are we going to save ourselves from the pain and from the issues that are coming? God frequently tells people to do the most insane thing that makes no sense. Walk around a wall. That doesn't make any sense. You should be setting up battle plans. You should be besieging the city. No. Walk around the wall.
With a little bit of music.
But that's the point. It's that we want to have control. Joseph wanted control. Solomon wanted control. And in surrendering control, he who gives up his life will find it.
One of the things that I've been doing lately that has been really difficult for me in April, the week before we lost our house, we lost our dog. And ever since that week, I couldn't write at all. And I'm a writer. I love to write. I love to write poetry and blog posts and songs and beautiful things that make me feel like I'm honoring the Lord. And I felt completely unable to do that. And I felt like on the narrow path that God has put me on, all I could do was lay on the dirt and cry and know that I was on the path, but not going very far, very fast. And so I wrote this last week, and it was the first time since April that I could really get it out. And like I think about Joseph in that story of just really wrestling on what path he needs to be on and what character traits he needs to have and what kind of forgiveness he should give his family and what all of that's going to look like long term, and feeling good that his family is taken care of, but also knowing how badly he is wounded. And so I posted the poem to our Instagram page and our YouTube because that's where I'm at. I'm totally 100% all in, but waiting and hurting and knowing that God isn't talking super loud to me, like that's really difficult. And I see that in Joseph here, and I see that in his weeping with his brothers. He finally lets them see him be vulnerable. And our job right now isn't necessarily to save everybody. It's just to be with them. It's just to cry with them. It's to hear what's going on with them and tell them that they're forgiven and tell them that they're loved and see them for who they really are and share vulnerably. Actually share something real, not just this influencer nonsense where life looks perfect and you do everything right and you have a great body and great clothes and great hair and your theology is perfect and you have thousands and tens of thousands of followers and people who love your quippy one-liners about what God wants to do for you in Jeremiah 29:11. That's not what this life is for, what this faith is for. And I just see that here. Go and weep with people, just like Joseph is about to do. Go and let them see and feel tangibly like what is in your heart, because that's going to speak way more loudly than the false teachings of this world in our faith.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. If you liked what you heard, please feel free to subscribe and share and leave a positive review. And if you would like to connect with us on social media, you can do so on Instagram and Facebook at The Logic of God. You can also send us an email at main.thelogicofgod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We hope you have a great day.